The Game's God's Play is a 2024 Romantasy novel by Abigail Owen. It was a Goodreads Choice Award nominee for Reader's Favorite Romantasy in 2024, and it won the Holt Medallion for Virginia Romance Writers for Speculative Fiction, I'm assuming, in 2025. I think I first clocked this one when it came out in stores. The Game's God's Play was part of that wave of romantasy books that came out with the fancy sprayed edges around the time when the trend really hit its peak, kind of in the summer-fall of 2024. And I'll grant you that the presentation was nice. It's a visually nice cover and the sprayed edges were really pretty. But I sensed, based on the summary, that it would be a very book talk, typical book. And for a while I decided I wasn't really interested in it. Then I found it was available on Libby when I had to go on a plane for 6 hours, so I decided it would be a sufficient way to spend my time in a pressurized, cramped canister full of strangers that I might die with if it crashed over the Atlantic. I don't like planes. I figured I couldn't like this book less than that. Lyra Kires is a young woman who grew up in a thief den in modern-day San Francisco after her parents sold her into it to settle a debt. In Lyra's world, the gods of various pantheons are very much real, and San Francisco in general has taken a shine to Zeus. Today is the day that champions are chosen for the Crucible, the competition that determines who the king of the gods will be for the next 100 years. This competition is in place for the purposes of preventing another devastating war to decide who runs Olympus. Now, Lyra has a bit of a bone to pick with Zeus. As the story goes, her mother's water broke when she was in Zeus's temple, and he was so irritated by the defilement of his space that he proceeded to curse unborn baby Lyra. She will forever be unlovable. It's clarified throughout the story that this doesn't mean that everyone hates her, it just means that they never choose her. I don't know, there was some ambiguous stuff here and there. It seems like her fellow thief Boone was able to develop a strong sense of affection for her in spite of the curse. So I don't know if the curse was supposed to be romantic love or what, but we'll get there. On the eve of the Crucible, after being humiliated in front of another thief that she has an obviously unrequited crush on, Boone, Lyra storms off to Zeus's temple to demand that he remove the curse. Instead, she finds a sexy, dark bad boy that really, sincerely, on God, I don't think I have to tell you who he is. Book Talk has such a collective hard-on for safely edgy bad boy romances, and between Scarlett Sinclair and Akatar, they've got a real taste for Hades now. So the two of them have a moment. Lyra puts her foot in her mouth several times and generally doesn't act like she's talking to the king of the underworld. But then it's time to skedaddle since the Crucible is due to start and the gods are all about to pick their tributes. Hades, of course, never participates in the Crucible, so there's absolutely zero chance of Lyra, the pretty young thing that he just dropped a pet name onto, my star, if you were wondering, getting shanghaied into the Crucible unexpectedly. Yeah. So Lyra becomes Hades' champion, and he starts getting real flirty and possessive towards her, which is fine, because in this incarnation of the Greek mythos, Persephone's been dead for 100 years, and also Hades never really loved her. They were just really bros in charge of the underworld. What ensues is your typical Hunger Games game show story where the champions all compete in a labor that is arranged by one particular god. Hades doesn't get one because he got into the Crucible too late. Lyra competes, she does okay, some contestants die, she gets real mad about it, which really doesn't seem to mean much insofar as character growth goes because she hated the gods from the beginning. It's not like her attitude towards them is being soured, she always hated them. Things start to get spicy around the time of Aphrodite's challenge. It requires that the champions go find the person that they love the most in their dreams and wake them up before dawn, else that person is dead. And once they get them back, that person is able to help them through the next labor, which is Hephaestus's. The person Lyra loves the most is Boone, and so he ends up entangled in the Crucible as well. Now, obviously, Hades and Lyra have been doing this will they, won't they for the last 400 pages. It's a really long, really long book. So naturally Hades is all pissy that Lyra's original one true love is back in the picture again. But don't worry! Boone gets violently murdered in Hephaestus' labor, so in the absence of competition, Hades becomes a lot more generous towards him. Lyra is also badly injured during this challenge, and Hades heals her by giving her some of his god blood. And do you guys know what Lyra ends up developing with Hades because she's partaken of his special god blood? An empathy bond that lets her feel his feelings! Ooh, it's not as bad as the telepathy bond you weird romantasy motherfuckers are so obsessed with. But it's telepathy adjacent, and I cannot escape this trope. Naturally, this brings Hades and Lyra even more closely together, and bing bong ensues. Just as naturally, we get a third act breakup when Lyra finds out that Hades lied about Persephone being dead. She's not actually dead, she's trapped in Tartarus, which makes Lyra assume that Hades has used her. Becoming king of the gods might, theoretically, enable him to free Persephone from Tartarus. Hades does pretty much nothing to dispel this idea, so I can't be too harsh on Lyra for assuming that this was all a ploy. And I mean, it's not like the Greek gods don't have a reputation for infidelity. I don't know. I just bring this up because it's kind of like a common trope in a lot of romantasy that I'm finding is like the third act breakup where it's, oh no, I've suddenly been betrayed by my one true love. How is this possible? Maybe we're not destined to be together forever. And it's a total fake out. It's a total fake out. I've read some other romantasy books as of the recording of this video, and it like, obviously some of them do the third act breakup, and then it's the next book that they get back together again, but it's becoming predictable, okay? It's becoming predictable. So Lyra continues with the remaining labors, and things come to a head during the final one, Zeus's. Lyra is such a wonderful person that's been so nice and kind throughout these trials and has dedicated herself to saving everyone else that the other competitors basically decide to let her win. Except Zeus doesn't like that, so he literally lightning strikes Lyra in the gut. Of course, this literally violates the terms of the competition, and Zeus is in big trouble. Hades comes skidding in to have a tragic romantic confession of love with Lyra right before she dies, and is then promptly brought back to life when Hades crowns her queen of the underworld, which transforms her into a goddess. She is declared winner of the Crucible because she was still mortal when she crossed the finish line, so Hades becomes king of the gods. Boone is made a god as well, ends up replacing Hermes as the god of Thebes. Hades gives all the champions, alive and dead, a boon, so a favor, essentially. And finally, he demands Pandora's box, which has the power to open the doors to Tartarus. The book ends off on our characters doing exactly that, only for Lyra to end up trapped in Tartarus with the Titans. Alright, haven't done this since my review of The Coven, but I really feel the need to start off with the content warning at the beginning of this book. Quote, "In the games gods play, the Greek gods walk among us, and they are as unspeakably beautiful as they are deadly. As such, this story features elements that might not be suitable for all readers, including blood, gore, violence, human, god, and monster alike, perilous situations, hospitalization, illness, injury, vomiting, abuse, bullying, theft, isolation, death, grief, use of alcohol, common phobias, including heights, burning, drowning, bugs, and darkness, graphic language, and sexual activity on the page. Readers who may be sensitive to these elements, please take note and prepare to enter the crucible." Unquote. Okay. If you have not seen my video review on the book, The Coven, allow me to briefly recap my feelings regarding trigger and content warnings in adult books. I do not like them, although I do support an author's right to use them if they so choose to. It's your book. You should have a right to do whatever you want with it. However, one of the reasons why I oppose trigger warnings in adult books as vigorously as I do is because there are adults in current year who believe that they are entitled to specific trigger warnings in books, and that if you do not put them in your adult book that one should reasonably assume contains adult content, that you are a bad person who does not care about your readers' trauma or mental health. My position is that you are responsible for your own mental health, and if it's really that big of a deal that you not engage with certain topics, then you need to take the initiative and avail yourself of the many resources available to you to figure out if a particular book is going to upset you. And if for some reason you are unable to do that, if you are unable to avail yourself of those many resources, my position is that the mature adult thing to do is to put the book down and not take the risk of triggering yourself. Mental illness is not your fault, but it is your responsibility. And sometimes that means having to do things that are not fun or convenient sometimes. This is my hill, and I am dying on it because I am deeply troubled by how many grown-ass adults I am seeing online who are starting to think that every book they encounter needs to have a content warning in it, and that authors who fail to do so are being irresponsible in some way. They are not. Let me be completely clear. Authors and other creators are not responsible for your mental health in any way, shape, or form. You are responsible for that, not a stranger on the internet. Now that I have my general opinion out of the way, this specific content warning is completely ridiculous. I'm not even going to qualify it with in my opinion. You can argue with me all you like. I'm not taking notes on this one. Yap until you're blue in the face. You're not convincing me that a trigger warning for perilous situations in an adult fantasy book is warranted. Not happening. You are delusional if you think that that is a reasonable thing to warn adults about in an adult fantasy book. This list of triggers borderline reads like a parody trigger warning list by someone trying to make fun of authors that use them. I may not agree with content or trigger warnings in books, but I can at least understand why an author who is inclined to using them would warn for things like rape or torture or extreme violence, especially if their depictions of these things is unusually graphic. But this specific content warning is the type that starts getting me really tilted. You are writing an adult book for adults. Why are you warning about theft? Why are you warning about alcohol usage? Why are you warning about bad language and phobias like heights? There comes a point where it starts to feel incredibly patronizing. Picking up an adult fantasy romance novel and being mad that you weren't warned about perilous situations, blood, injury, is like ordering a pizza and being mad that there's cheese on it. I am dying on this hill, and I will not apologize for it. Water is wet. Bear shit in the woods. Adult books are going to have adult content in them. Sometimes that content might be distressing because that is the nature of adult content, and we are absolutely cooked as a society if we are expecting authors to warn for bog-tier, entry-level distressing topics like injury, illness, or theft of all things. These are basic adult topics that come up in normal everyday life. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I call it Book Talk has done irreversible damage not just to its users' psyches, but also the writing and literature communities as a whole. Moving on. The author made a very interesting choice to title every chapter of the book. Not including the preface and epilogue, there are 111 chapters in this book, which is 509 pages long. So, if my incredibly poor math skills work out for me this time, that would mean each chapter is about an average of 5 pages long, obviously with some being a little longer, being a little shorter here and there, give or take. I'm not saying the author was wrong to have chapter titles. I'm just saying it's an odd choice in this case because there are over 100 fairly short chapters in this book, and a lot of the titles she picks for them end up being very obvious, redundant, or, I guess as the kids say, unserious. For example, Chapter 10 is titled Rock, Hard Place, and Me. Chapter 12 is titled I Was Never Any Good at Tests. Chapter 15 is titled You Better Work, Bitch. And Chapter 84 is titled If Trust Won't Work, Try Bribery. If you're wondering why there was a big jump between the earlier chapters and Chapter 84, it's because the book progressively takes a more serious tone as it goes on, and the chapter titles adjust to reflect that. But in general, the first part of the book, you know, the part that's supposed to hook me in and get me excited for the rest of it, didn't really encourage me to take it too seriously with some of those chapter titles. They're trying to be funny, but they're not clever. It's very TikTok book talk humor, if you get what I mean by that. I may as well say this now while I'm on the topic. This entire book felt very book talk coded. Like it was written specifically to cater to the book talk romantasy crowd. And that makes sense to me because this book has a 4.11 rating on Goodreads with 76,000 people contributing to that score. So clearly it was a banger with its intended audience. But I personally find book talk coded books to be kind of annoying and predictable. Anyway, as for the chapter titles, it personally doesn't make a lot of sense to me to give every chapter a dedicated title, unless it's significant in some way, especially when the chapters are so short. If they were longer and you were coming up with a significant title to represent the vibe of the whole chapter, I would get it. I almost feel like the author really wanted a few specific chapters to have titles, and therefore she maybe felt like she had to commit to all of them having titles, even if she didn't have really good, solid names planned out for them. A while back, I recommended Kel Byron's A Lonely Broadcast. I recently started reading the sequel, and she chose to give the chapters individual names as well. But the book is 239 pages long, and the chapters, though obviously varying slightly, average somewhere between 10 and 20 pages a chapter. This is understandable to me. Long chapters with a lot of events in them, go ahead and slap a title on that bitch. But when you have a book as long as The Games Gods Play and the chapters are mostly 5 pages long, it just seems really pointless to me. On that note, I also need to kind of call out here that I really feel like there didn't need to be so many separate short chapters in the book. 8 and 9, for example, could have just as easily been one chapter. We didn't need to start a whole new one. A handful of them were like this, where the chapters would just end off on a character saying something, and then the very beginning of the next one would just a continuation of the conversation. There was no need to make a whole new chapter. Seems like a good time to segue generally into the writing, and I was not impressed. An example from what my e-reader tells me is page 14. Quote, "That incident put our den on Poseidon's shit list for years. Yes, den. The name isn't exactly creative, but we're thieves, not poets. I mentally shrug. At least Felix isn't hell's bent on trying to steal Hades' pomegranate seeds again." Unquote. Okay, so a few notes. One, the bit defending the use of the word den is weird to me. It's not at all unusual for a thief's hideout to be referred to as a den, so I'm not sure why the author felt the need to have Lyra defend that choice of wording. It was unnecessary, and it feels a little odd because it comes across like we're tapping on the fourth wall and acknowledging the audience. Like you're anticipating that you're going to be criticized for using the word den, and you're trying to cut it off at the pass. Second, I mentally shrug. Listen, I get the vibe that authors are going for when they write stuff like this, but it's just not great writing. Real people don't mentally shrug. They just shrug. They physically shrug. Mentally, they become dismissive. They become nonchalant, which is the vibe usually associated with shrugging. They say, oh well, whatever. I could even understand having a character say, I wanted to shrug, or I almost shrugged, in direct response to someone else saying something. But if you really feel like shrugging, especially in response to your own train of thought, usually just go ahead and do it and move on. I do it all the time. Another thing was just, okay, this is a modern alternate universe story. Lyra lives in an alternate world where the gods are real and accessible, to an extent, to the modern populace, so I can't fault her for using modern slang because this is literally a modern setting, but this was a choice. Page 173, according to my e-reader, quote, "And Hades does the worst possible thing. He softens. He cups my face with one hand, his thumb skating gently over my lip where I drew blood. His eyes change from cutting steel to a swirl of mercury, and what I see in them is understanding. Don't do that. I can't talk around the lump clogging my throat, so I just shake my head. You're going to be okay, I promise. I can't remember the last time someone said anything remotely like that to me. And it hits me right in the feels." Unquote. You have this very soft, intimate moment with Hades being kind to her and assuring her, and you follow it up with slang that I and my compatriots were using back in 2013. I'm not saying you can't use that phrase or older slang, go for it, but I am saying that, one, it's going to immediately stand out to your audience, especially the younger sections, and two, you literally dropped it into a serious emotional moment. I cannot stress enough that this moment was not funny. It was not written to be funny. It was supposed to be heartwarming, and you just made the choice to drop in a choice of wording here that is, as the kids say today, extremely unserious. Holy mood whiplash, Batman. It may seem like I'm nitpicking some relatively small things here, but little choices like these are made constantly throughout the book, and in general, they just can make a person's writing come across as unprofessional. I see it in a lot of book talk coded books. These kinds of choices get made constantly, and it just, in general, it doesn't come across as a well-written book. My next issue, which encompasses both the writing and the characters, is our protagonist, Lyra. In short, Lyra is a sassy girl boss who constantly says things that she should not be getting away with. Okay, let me explain. The hero of any story is only as impressive as the obstacles you put in front of them, including the villains conspiring to take them down. Obviously, you don't want your villains to be so overpowered that the hero can't move 2 steps without being executed. But if you want your hero to be viewed as courageous, you do have to make the villains enough of a threat that there is a significant risk and consequence to running afoul of them. In the beginning of this book, Lyra makes it very clear that the gods are jealous, petty assholes who don't think twice about cursing mortals and otherwise destroying or ending their lives. The mission statement in her den is to never piss off the gods, because in this book, they are very, very real observable forces of nature and as such pose significant threats to people. And yet, I can kind of excuse the first extremely stupid and dangerous thing that Lyra does, which is going to Zeus's temple to demand that he lifts her curse. Once she gets there, she gets so mad that she goes to chuck a rock at one of the columns and is subsequently stopped by Hades. I can excuse this because Lyra's in a state of emotional distress after being humiliated by something directly related to Zeus and her curse. The rest of the book I can't excuse. Lyra is constantly mouthing off to and around the gods. She mouths off to Hades, she mouths off to Athena, she mouths off to the other champions representing the gods, you know, the ones that want her to lose and or die because it means the god has a better chance of becoming ruler of all the gods. Girl, you have been living with a curse that Zeus threw on you as an unborn baby because he was butthurt that your mom's water broke in his temple. And you are literally being openly targeted by the other candidates because no one wants Hades to win. So why are you testing Athena's patience? And see, here's the thing. I could excuse all of this if there were big, major consequences, and there almost are towards the end. Athena gets so mad at Lyra for running her mouth that they have to put Lyra in jail in order to protect her. Except that it's extremely cushy and has a computer with internet access, and jailers who are content to chat and play cards with her. It's not a punishment, it's not a consequence, it's a mild inconvenience. And the next time Lyra comes into contact with Athena, it's when she's become Hades' queen and is now a god herself. So now she's more protected against a potential payback from the other gods. Every single time I see this in media, it gets under my skin. When your main character is a sassy girl boss who never faces consequences for mouthing off and rebelling against the villains or people in power, you damage your story overall because you remove any gravitas that those villains might have had. You leave any suspense or tension that those villains might carry through on a threat or a consequence for the hero. When the main character mouths off constantly and never catches hands for it, the audience learns that the villains are more or less toothless. They can't be that scary, or they would have done something terrible in retribution for that behavior. Or, alternatively, the audience learns that your character has an unreasonable amount of plot armor, thereby removing any tension surrounding their safety. While on that subject, there were points during the book where the author seemed to be hinting that Lyra might have been more than an ordinary human. Being abandoned so young by her parents, surviving the fall from Hades' waterfall in Olympus, I think Cerberus may have explicitly said that only a demigod could survive that. The presence of the axe that just magically appears in her room one day as a thief. There are a few other small hints that I'm kind of forgetting now because I'm a dumbass and I didn't write them down. But the vibe was that the author was hinting that Lyra is more than human. I don't know if she abandoned this idea or if it's something that gets brought up in the sequel, but it definitely seemed like it was being hinted that Lyra might be a demigod. Now for her steaming hot boyfriend, Hades. Hades is the archetypical Romantasy book talk popular romance book bad boy. I use that phrase loosely. I will grant you that the actual mythology figure Hades sometimes gets a bad rap in media for being the god of death, and that he is canonically not really better or worse than any of the other gods, since most of them are dicks anyway, but Hades hits several bullet points that I've noticed among Romantasy and book top popular romance love interests. First, he's misunderstood. He's not bad or evil, just sad and lonely and brooding, which Lyra, like many female protagonists, comes to understand and become weak at the knees over. He's possessive and in some respects overprotective of Lyra, and is low-key jealous when Boone comes around, because just like she can't handle the idea of him still possibly being into Persephone, he cannot handle the idea of her still being into Boone. Hades is also tragically traumatized, the bulk of the trauma being that he has to rule over the dead and consequently gets to see a lot of their traumas and miseries. He has a pet name for Lyra, My Star, very common in the Romantasy genre. He occupies a special place or position of power. In this case, he's a god, though in other Romantasy books it can translate to being royalty or some sort of chosen one. He has a found family that loves him for who he is. That's Charon and Cerberus, although technically Aphrodite is the one sister who actually still likes him, I think. He just checks a lot of the boxes. If you've read the A Court of Thorns and Roses series, you realize that Rhysand, who is himself based on Hades, checks a lot of the same boxes. And yes, I know, I get it. That's a thing that Romantasy readers enjoy. The Games Gods Play has a super high Goodreads rating, so it's a hit with the target audience. But this is the kind of thing that drives readers who aren't fond of those tropes away. Or at least it pushes people away from the Romantasy genre overall once you start realizing just how similar a lot of the books are to one another. What else? The epilogue felt super rushed. We jumped from Hades requesting Pandora's box as this big gasp moment. Like he apologizes to Lyra because he's requesting something that could be used to unleash chaos in the world. Perfect cliffhanger, right? Well, then we cut to the epilogue where Lyra info dumps and explains that the legends got Pandora's box wrong and it can do a lot of things, but opening Tartarus is one of them. So they do it, and then she gets stuck. I almost get the sense that the author wanted to end the book on that cliffhanger, like the readers are really going to have to rethink Hades' character because Lyra spent most of the book defending him to everybody else. But then I think the author might have realized that starting book 2 with the epilogue might have been a bit awkward, might even feel like a bit of a fake out that would piss off the fans. If book 1 ends with, oh no, Hades is being bad, and then book 2 ends up with, haha, never mind, might get people a little rowdy, might bring out the Annie Wilkes in them.
They just cheated us! He didn't get out of the cock-a-doodie car!
Regardless, I feel like a little bridge between that scene and the epilogue would have made things a little smoother. So yeah, was not a fan. Will not be picking up book 2. This is a book for people who are deep into book talk romantasy, and I am not one of them.